Healthcare is not just medical. It's social, it's engineering to deliver the solutions, it's the science which underpins all of medicine. One really key challenge is that healthcare costs are increasing because of the ageing population. There is also, of course, always the drive to deliver a better standard of healthcare, and that's usually more expensive. So we've got to find a way of squaring that particular circle.
I think one of the great things that's happened over the last decade with the Human Genome Project, for example, is that it's shown that you can start to get a large amount of information. And I think one of the great challenges in going forward in post-genomic science and engineering is to actually turn that information into knowledge. So there's a lot of data out there, if you like. And I think one of the important things is to do something practical with that avalanche of data.
We bring a very close working relationship between the university and the hospital. We jealously guard our position in a teaching hospital. This is really important with respect to credibility, with respect to translation, with respect to everything about bringing these tools from a twinkle in an academic's eye to a clinical environment. Why has Sheffield been successful? Well, I think that we have a reputation that we say what we'll do and then we deliver on it.
The principal focus of this research institute is interdisciplinary research, so it combines many aspects of science, engineering and medicine to address many of the principal problems that as a human race we actually have.
I'm Professor Philip Wright. I'm the Director of the ChELSI Institute, which stands for Chemical Engineering at the Life Science Interface. And we're based here in the Chemical and Biological Engineering Department at the University of Sheffield. And at the moment we're in the main laboratories to do with mass spectrometry. So this is an analytical tool which we're using to look for proteins in biological systems and in medical systems in particular. And what we're focusing at the moment is on colon cancer, prostate cancer, diseases in the mouth, so dental problems, these kinds of things.
We have a system set up over here to look for biomarkers. It's a mass spectrometer analyzing protein samples we get from the medical school. The proteins themselves are chemically labeled, and what we use is to exploit these chemical labels to provide us with abundance differences that we can actually pinpoint to actually identify biomarker changes in different stages of the disease.
It's a particularly good technique because what it allows you to do is to look through lots of samples very, very quickly. So obviously if you're looking at patient samples, it's very important to get enough patients so that you've got enough material to understand statistically that is a real marker for a disease condition like prostate cancer, for example, or like colon cancer. Working with the colleagues in the medical school, this hopefully allows us to gain some kind of understanding of what's making the disease progress from a benign state to something that's really, really quite serious. And the idea, of course, is that hopefully we'll be able to develop some understanding and perhaps some diagnostic tools that we can catch these diseases early and hopefully save some lives. When we set up the ChELSI Institute here in Chemical and Biological Engineering, the idea was that we had a concept where we thought we could take the tools that we understood from chemical engineering, and this is in design of large process plant, steelworks, petrochemical refineries, these kinds of things, and apply some of the same concepts to solving biological problems at non-traditional interfaces. And in particular, we decided to work with colleagues in the medical school to see whether we could use some of the same understanding to solve biological problems of importance to human health. And that's really where we decided to focus this institute. And also, interestingly, we've obtained quite a lot of money in general in ChELSI from the pharmaceutical industry. And that's particularly focused on biopharmaceutical production, in particular, so protein drugs in other words. And so we've got a lot of the large pharmaceutical companies sponsoring studentships here, directly funding research and coming to visit it. I think the investment has really made that possible because without the facilities that you see around here, it wouldn't have been possible to do that.
Our principal area of research is repairing human body parts, either using synthetic materials or, as people are very aware, using living cells to engineer functional tissues to repair the body. So this is our tissue engineering and tissue culture laboratory. Tissue culture, the growing of living cells inside these incubators, is a really fundamental technique and technology for many areas of science. There are two really good reasons why we wish to culture cells in a lab like this. Firstly, we want to culture cells on materials to predict how the living body would respond to that material. This often cuts out the use of animals in research, and if we're using human cells, there's a much clearer idea about how the body is going to respond to a new material. Secondly, of course, I mentioned earlier, there's this fantastic new field of cell therapy and tissue engineering, actually using these cells as living factories to repair and regenerate tissues in the body. This is the future for medicine.
It combines elements of classical engineering and making medical devices, together with aspects of stem cell science, and putting the two together to actually have a form of therapy that can be used to address when the body goes wrong. We do work with industries as well, and so a good example is in our own research for nerve guides to repair nerve injury. And so we have commercial partners who manufacture medical devices, and they are very interested because effectively they can see a product being made.
The key challenges in tissue engineering of skin are actually very interesting. People have been culturing skin cells since the early 80s. So the question isn't can you do it and will they work, but how can you make it convenient for patients, convenient for surgeons and affordable? And that's actually the biggest challenge, as you might imagine. We've been working with the burn surgeons in Sheffield since '92. We've been looking at developing cell carriers to improve the quality of cells that leave the lab and get onto the patient, and also to try and make some aspects of this commercially viable as well.
One of the particular partners that we've been working with recently through the Regenerate group is Kairos. And Kairos are based in Leeds, and what they've done traditionally is make synthetic ligaments, and they've been very, very successful in this for well over 15 years. And so they've become interested, and they've come on board with us to use their processing technologies with polymers to actually make nerve guides, a completely different area for them, but something with which we've got a multitude of expertise in.
Our group has a long experience working with industry. This is still very much the cutting edge where industry is engaged, because it's this device industry that's involved in treating millions of patients worldwide. And often working with small companies, this is a really good example of how the university can offer tremendous benefit, because small companies don't necessarily have large facilities on their back doorstep, whereas Sheffield University has every kind of research laboratory you could possibly want. So here we have cell culture for the evaluation of biocompatibility, but we have laboratories for materials science, materials development, characterization, and ultimately we can even go through to clinical evaluation in the hospital, which is at the back of this building. It's a fantastic opportunity to really take products through from concept to market.
This is actually quite a large laboratory in terms of its surface area. We've got a multitude of different pieces of equipment, and we've actually got PhD students and postdocs and technicians who spend many hours in here per day working on a multitude of different projects. We have 5 principal investigators, of which I am one. I have my own research group, which is about 15 people. And so effectively the way in which the laboratory is organised is according to the techniques that people need to do.
What you see behind you is a suite of clean rooms. Now these, as the dials imply, have got complex airflows, and they're designed so that you can culture patients' skin cells under very, very clean conditions that would allow you to get accreditation by the Department of Health so that the cells are fit for use on patients. But I think the key strengths of our research group are that we are interdisciplinary. So at one end we start off with working with clinicians to define what the problem is, and actually this is the hardest bit. The thing that you think is the problem is not often the problem. And then we have cell biologists, tissue engineers, material scientists, polymer chemists, right through to getting cells back to the patient, which sometimes we've done that on a commercial basis.
Multidisciplinary work in Sheffield is the right place to be, particularly in what I do, because I work a lot with polymeric materials and polymeric nanotechnology, and we definitely are one of the strongest, if it's not the strongest in the country, polymer nanotechnology groups here. In the last 10 years or so, there has been a great reduction in the amount of new therapies that we can bring into the clinics. And there are many problems associated with this reduction, mostly to do, of course, with the discovery of new therapies and the understanding of biology and medicine, but also problems in how actually we deliver those therapeutics into the clinics and how actually these are formulated then into the clinics. And that's where it now is becoming extremely interesting and challenging from the physical scientist point of view, using the same expertise that is being used in the past for developing new nanoscopic objects. They can be adapted into actually tackle some of these pharmaceutical challenges. It's also giving the opportunity to have a 360-degree view of a problem, and therefore using chemistry expertise, physics expertise, as well as the medics and the biologists together to tackle their challenges. And that is not just allows us to have 4 times more resources, actually 40 times more resources, because the combined effect is actually 10 times better than the single one.
The university is a very good environment in which to do that, because it has invested in, for example, this building, this suite of clean rooms, which is $750,000. Without those, you can't go all the way from identifying the clinical problem doing the research and getting right back to the patient. So for me, completing the loop and going back to the patient is really where it's at.
There's little doubt that we need to change the way that we live, the way the society is structured in order to accommodate the ageing population, but we also should embrace some of the benefits that an ageing society can bring as well as the challenges.
Together with becoming old, people have more disability, more long-term conditions, and the health service is struggling to cope with this. And society is struggling to cope with this. There are lots more people to care for, and there are a lot less people to care for them. We're looking at ways that information and communication technologies and services supported by information and communication technologies can start to meet these challenges of caring for older people in their homes. We're working with the National Health Service, the NHS. They're interested in improving care whilst keeping costs at a reasonable level, and we're trying to help them do that. This whole area of research needs an interdisciplinary approach. We have clinical scientists, health services researchers, computer scientists, engineers.
What we have now is possibly one of the largest, if not the largest, group in the UK working in the area of assisted living. We also have experience of projects from innovation right through to implementation. If you come to Sheffield, you'll get expertise right through from prototyping through to how products can be mainstreamed into health and social care and how users might adopt them in their own homes.
Being healthy now and ageing in a healthy manner is not just a medical problem, it's a social problem, it's an economic problem, it's an engineering problem, and it's become recognised that these problems are so complex that we require the tools that we've developed in mathematics and in science and in engineering to actually be able to solve them. I would characterise biology as being data rich and information poor. This is because we've now got absolutely enormous amount of information. It's essential that we build computational models which act as thinking tools for us.
The point of the computation really is either to measure things that cannot easily be measured in the human, or to reduce the amount of invasive measurements that we have to make that might be uncomfortable for you.
We've just started a project with Procter & Gamble, and the idea is that they will be able to see what the effect of their products is on skin. We don't have a central blueprint which tells the cells what to do. Their behaviour is a result of the interaction between the individual cells, and this interaction is chemical and it's physical.
We can now do an analysis in 2 or 3 hours that took 2 or 3 days. That's fantastic, but unless we actually deliver it into the clinic, then it's all meaningless. We need to translate these to the clinic. It's why we're here.
Healthcare issues are complex, and we can't solve them from an individual specialist's point of view.
We've always been very good at Sheffield at working across the disciplines. There's a kind of excitement when you meet a chemist and you meet an engineer and you're a biologist, you immediately come up with new ways of putting your skills and knowledge together to come up with something radical and imaginative.
That to me is the real excitement, that one can apply the many areas of that basic science to address many of the big problems that essentially mankind has, for making leaps and bounds in having something that could work as a therapy.
It's trying to maximise these collaborations. I think it's trying to get the message out to people and finding new people to work with and to maximise working together and solve new problems, and I think that's one of the things that excites me.
You need people with different knowledge sets and different backgrounds to come together and to talk about the problem, to discuss the problem from their own aspects. That is a very creative way to develop solutions to problems.